Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast. I'm your host, Cyril Gerald-Quinn, as I look at episode, as we are, this is, of course, episode 770 of the Real Deal podcast, Snowfall edition, episode season 4, episode 7, through a glass, darkly, through a glass, darkly. That was, of course, the title of this episode. Um, Again, through a glass darkly to have an obscure or imperfect vision of reality from First Corinthians 13:12. It is perfectly describes what a lot of our characters have at this point in the season. We are more than halfway through the season, just 3 episodes left in the season. Again, Um, another powerful episode of Snowfall, as both Franklin and Teddy Mack continue to lose things and continue to fall deeper and deeper in terms of their respective respective organizations and respective assignments in terms of what they need to do. We go to themes of this episode: internal strife, and we see that within the Franklin Saint household, and we see that within Teddy Mack from within, as he is just coming apart at the seams. We go to best scenes. Jerome, Louis, Franklin, and Leon having a meeting. This was the first scene of the episode. They are discussing, of course, the fallout of Fatback's death. Louis, for the first time, you see Louis in a kind of a panic type mood, because the body, of course, was dropped right in front of the club. So Louis, who is normally a voice of reason, normally a calm and cool customer, is is kind of a little bit all over the place here in this particular scene, and kind of nervous and anxious about a possible war with, of course, Manboy and Scully. Franklin, says everything's going to be good. We Y'all expanded in Arkansas. The cops got their fall guy, and thinking that Fatback was the fall guy. At this point, they do not know about the bounty that's coming down that's on their heads. So at this point, but again, Louis is still concerned about the a possible war and about violence near a club. And you have Jerome, who's kind of resorted to the fate of this life, and he's just gonna go with the flow at this point after receiving the news from Louis from last episode about Reed Thompson and or about Teddy Mack and Reed Thompson, who are the same person, and being involved in the CIA. So Jerome was kind of like, okay, we just gotta do what we gotta do, but he wasn't. You saw you saw Franklin kind of check in with Jerome at the end of the scene, as Jerome is kind of quiet, was a little bit quiet during the scene. But again, this scene was mainly about, Louis, to me, Louis being, for the first time looking kind of frazzled, for the very first, for one of the first times in the show, over the course of the show, to be honest with you. Franklin and Peaches get followed. Very important scene because they're being followed by an unknown, and Franklin is able to identify that the fact that they're not being followed because they were going to get jacked. They were being followed because whoever was following them wanted to know where they were meeting the plug, when and where they were meeting the plug. And to me, we know who that is. I mean, that has to be Manboy. We'll flush this scene out later on and connect this scene to a later scene later on in the episode. But there's no question that is Manboy. And again, Franklin does at this point. Franklin does not know who is following him, but he knows why. He knows, more importantly, he knows why they're following him. He's able to identify the fact that they are not following, we're not following to, try to jack him up. They are following again to find out where his meeting with the plug. Alton at the shelter. So Alton goes to the shelter and he sees the baby of one of his, and again, Alton's at the shelter. Again, he's going through it as far as thinking about what transpired over the course of the last episode, him finding out the news, um, him basically being threatened by Eileen that his family would get exposed if he didn't help her out, if he didn't help expose Teddy and the CIA out. So he's fighting his own internal strife from that standpoint, dealing with his own emotions from within. So it only gets worse for him as he goes into the shelter, sees that the baby of one of the crackheads is just wandering about with no supervision, and he goes and finds out. He goes and finds the father who has overdosed right basically right next to the shelter, and of course this devastates Alton. Of course, that's that the father had a teenage son as well as a daughter. So Alton understands the system as far as those as far as those kids possibly being um, split apart in the future. So we see Alton continuously guilt ridden over the course of this scene and over the course of this episode. So Alton meets up with Sissy. He tells Sissy about um, tells Sissy that he thinks, tells Sissy that Franklin should quit. We should get out now. We should get out now. Sissy basically says, let's wait for Franklin. And, you know, he he is desperate to get out, considering the news that he got from Irene from the last episode. He's desperate to get out. He also sees what the drugs are doing to his community. So Alton kind of is all over the place here with his thoughts. But the one thing Alton at this point in his life one thing we know about Alton at this point in his life is how much he cares about the community, how much and how perceptive he is. He sees everything. You remember when he called the Teddy Mack, basically wanting to use Franklin and would toss him aside at a moment's notice. So Alton knows the game. Alton is understanding the road that Franklin is traveling, and he frankly wants no part of it any longer. And he wants the family to get out, to get out of this lifestyle. Alton goes in and meets up with Irene and confesses with Irene at a bar. Irene has a tape recorder, and he confesses everything to Irene officially confesses everything to Irene as she has a tape recorder. So he has officially basically sold his soul. He's officially basically snitched out Franklin and Teddy Mack to a reporter who has her own grudge against the government, as we'll come to find out over the course of the episode. So you have them meet up, and Irene records every word that Alton talks about, out that in terms of information that Alton knows. Jerome and Big Dion. So Leon is back in the projects, but the problem is he's been gone for so long that he is no longer in charge, frankly. And we meet this new character who I think is going to play a major role moving forward, named Big Dion. Big Dion looks like he was straight out the NFL. This dude was like he towered over Leon, and more importantly, he is Fatback's cousin. So he feels, he somewhat blames Leon being responsible for the death of Fatback, and more importantly, even beside, on top of that, um, he calls out Leon for not taking care of the projects, for not taking care of the projects, not supporting the people around the projects something that Fatback did, and we find out in the scene how valuable Fatback was. You know, we joke about Fatback. It seemingly was not the smartest dude in many ways, but in reality, it was Fatback who, in essence, was holding down the projects because of the relationships and because of the money that he was putting back into the streets or into the projects. So he was bought loyalty amongst the people within the projects that allowed Leon to move the way he moved and allowed Leon to run the projects. So that to me was the bigger. It was two reveals from that standpoint. The fact that Fatback has this powerful cousin who is an OG who um, was around the same age as Jerome, and again, you had an initial scene that he was about to beat Leon's ass, and Leon recognized that, like, I need some help here. I need somebody older that could better relate. So then comes in Jerome. Jerome, prior to the scene, Jerome told Leon, look, it's more about, to an OG like Big Dion, it's more to it than about banging, uh, gang banging and money. It's about community. It's about respect. So they are able to have a grown man conversation. Jerome and Big Dion. Jerome throws a barbecue. They chop it up. They double. They and matter of fact, I mean, bottom line is they need Big Dion because Big Dion has muscle. Franklin, of course, is trying to rebuild his organization in terms of muscle. Right now, he was light on muscle, so he needs protection from of Big Dion. And the bottom line is if he wants to regain if he wants Leon to have the projects again, that does not exist without Big Dion. So Jerome cuts a deal with Big Dion. They pay Big Dion's peoples double. They recruit some muscle, and of course, We see how that will pay off later on in the episode. Again, that conversation with Jerome and Big Dion was a man-to-man conversation. Big Dion looked at Leon like a child, in essence. He really did. He looked, not only so much of in terms of the difference in size, but in terms of just in mentality. But with Jerome, and apparently Jerome knew of some Big Dion's peoples from back in the day, so they made some connections in terms of that. So they were able to chop it up, have a conversation, and come to an agreement, basically sparing Leon. I really think sparing Leon and causing, for Franklin to have, that less things that something less thing that Franklin would have to worry about. Leon's bounty. So Leon has a $5,000 bounty on his head via Khadijah. We know Khadijah wants him dead. We will get to Khadijah because Khadijah she was on another one in this episode with some of the stuff she's doing. So a crackhead, as Leon is talking to some of his new soldiers during that night and with Jerome and talking business, a crackhead comes up, pulls a gun on Leon and says $5,000. You got a $5,000 bounty on your head. Basically says, my kids need to eat and so on and so on. And before she pulls the trigger, Leon sees one of his soldiers behind her and says, how are you gonna collect the money if you're dead? So one of his new soldiers, a guy who could calculate basically 10,000 times 10,000. Basically, this guy is a math whiz, but we see that he's vicious in the streets as well as he was ready to take out the crackhead who was about to kill Leon with the bounty, who has a bounty on his head. And we find out that not only does Leon have a bounty on his head, anybody connected to Leon has a bounty on their head. So not Franklin, Leon tells the girl, if you want something, the thing to do is ask. He gives her some money. Jerome says, hold up, and takes about half the money and asks for more information from the girl. And that's where they found out that Jerome, that not only does Franklin Not only does Leon have a bounty on his head, but again, Jerome, Franklin, Louis, anybody connected to Jerome, to Leon has a bounty on their head. So we get to Khadijah. Khadijah again is on a rampage right now. She has someone killed who looks like Leon. So she has two of the girls come up to go up to Man Boy and ask for the $5,000. It turns out that the person that they killed was resembled Leon but was not Leon. Man Boy tells them basically basically tells them to fuck off and just get away. He pulls a gun on two of them. So then you have Man Boy and Khadijah meet up, and Man Boy is enraged because Khadijah is frankly is out of control. And Man Boy says, "Look, I got shit in motion, and I'm gonna connect that to one of the earlier scenes." Man Boy is the one who was following Franklin, or not him directly, but his peoples. Man Boy, similar to, again, we keep making these wire Snowfall comparisons, but I look at Man Boy has some Marlowe Stansfield in him. Man Boy, like Marlowe did in season 5, with taking out Prop Joe and going through the cutting Prop Joe out to connect. You see, Man Boy is has a plan to cut Franklin to meet to connect and cut Franklin out to connect. And right now, with how unstable Teddy Mack is, it would not be that hard, to be honest with you. That is a meeting that Franklin does not want to happen. You do not want Man Boy and Reed Thompson meeting and Teddy Mack meeting. Don't want that meeting to happen if you're Franklin. So Man Boy's frustrated by Khadijah. Um, she's put the $5,000 on his head on Leon's head, and so we see those two argue, and of course they're brother and sister, and of course she does not have any patience with Man Boy or Scully in regards to she wants Leon, and that's all there is to it. So this is going to be very interesting because from a standpoint, these two clearly are not on the same page. Uh, Man Boy is thinking long term, playing the long game. Khadijah wants instant revenge. We see Teddy. So Teddy and Avi, to give you some context on this scene I'm about to describe, Teddy and Avi go down to South America. We find out about the stolen guns, that it was an inside job. One of the bankers took $15 million from Teddy, caused caused a shipment of guns to basically go missing. Didn't have the money for the shipment of guns, which which complicated the war in Nicaragua, of course. So there were a lot of moving parts with this. Teddy finds out the banker. He finds out that, first of all, the money has been put back into his account. But even with that being said, he still wants to know who was it that took the money out of took $15 million from him. So he goes to the banker's house, uh, even without even having Avi advise him not to do so. He goes there, tortures this guy, does that water torture where he puts a towel over the dude's head and pours water on him. That's one of these techniques that you see in a lot of these movies with hostages. You saw it in Safe House. You saw it, which has been coming on HBO recently. Safe House had it, where they had that as a torturing technique. So Teddy uses that, and the police, he gets no information from the dude, and as the cops bust in along with the bank manager and Avi, Teddy is able to slip away, just missing the cops. Teddy at this point is just off his rockers. He's snorting coke. He's drinking a lot. That's the shit with his brother has completely thrown him off. He is as unstable can be. Even we had a scene where even Franklin was talking to Gustavo about him, asking him if he was good, and Gustavo, of course, is following orders. Is going to say, "Hey, no, he's okay. He'll be fine." But Franklin, of course, is definitely concerned about how unstable Teddy is at this moment, and and Teddy's even more unstable than even Franklin, than even what Franklin realizes. So he tortures the banker and gets nothing out of the banker. I mean, no information whatsoever, and it was able to get away before the cops came in and bust down the door. We go to Alton, Sissy, and Franklin. So you have Franklin finds out that his dad's a snitch, and his dad, says, "Hey, I said Shakur went to Cuba." Of course, he's talking referring to one of his Black Panther, one of his Black Panthers colleagues back in the day. Franklin is not trying to hear any of it whatsoever. He is enraged by it. If you remember, they don't have the greatest relationship to begin with. If you go back to season 2, Alton, of course, abandoned Franklin, end up going to jail. It didn't take a lot for them not to be on the same page, and this is considered to be like the ultimate betrayal by Alton. He pistol whips, and I really thought that he might shoot him. To be honest with you, I thought they did an excellent job at kind of making you think that he actually might kill him, but he pulls a gun on him, pistol whips him, says, "Don't ever call me son," and kicks him out the house. Sissy, of course, and again, in a scene earlier, Sissy was speaking to Alton, and she says, "Listen, this was like a 2-year thing," and Alton is basically saying, you're fooling yourself. This is not going to end anytime soon," which he's right. But again, Sissy is fully committed to Franklin. She's going to ride or die with Franklin. This is all there is to it. So Franklin, at this point, feels completely betrayed. It's two things going on here. Not only got the betrayal from his father, but the fact that all this information is out there. All this information is out there to a reporter, and the blowback that he could face from Teddy, and just this could obviously sink the entire organization, beginning with Franklin. So, despite what the reporter told Alton, saying that she would leave her family out of it, Franklin, again, this totally goes against what Franklin's all about in regards to not snitching, in regards to not giving up his people. We saw that if he was going to give up anybody, it would have been Leon. He protected Leon. So this is against anything that Franklin believes in, and I cannot see that relationship being repaired anytime soon. To be honest with you, I just can't. Like that relationship is dead at this point. So we see Tenosi and Franklin. So after this, Franklin, of course, is distraught. He meets up with Tanasi. She does his hair, or whatever, scalps, greases his scalp. And Franklin, says, we're in a lot of trouble, without going to specifics, as a tear rolls down his eye. Again, a lot going on in this episode, to say the least. Again, the themes to me was internal strife. And again, both Franklin and Teddy, Franklin continues to lose things. We saw him lose, to lose his operation in regards to the projects. We've seen him lose, what happened with Fatback. We see him, even though Leon is somewhat back on his side, they are not as close as they once were. Now he's lost his father. So he, throughout the course of this season, has continuously lost things. Still using the cane. He's in a position where he's going to have to, he's going to have to make some tough decisions. He's going to have to make some tough decisions, and then to kind of like combat what's going on with his father. We see that Irene, of course, is celebrating. Irene, of course, is celebrating you know, Alton giving her all the information that he gave her. We see Irene, wanting to share a drink with her ex-husband. Her ex-husband, of course, is not as thrilled because he knows that Irene is first of all, he doesn't, and her ex-husband is a smart one because the ideal, during a scene with Irene and Alton, Irene basically saying, I can protect you. There's no way in the world that Irene can do anything to protect Franklin and his family. I mean, she's a reporter. Like that information, and her ex-husband knows that that the information what she has is powerful and dangerous, and he basically tells her like, what are you going to do when this gets out? Like, how are you going to be safe when this information gets out? So, and then we find out that Irene also has a grudge against the government. So she has her own agenda from that standpoint. Also, one last thing before we get to the MVP, we saw some information about Lucille. Of course, you saw Gustavo ask about Lucille last week. Asked Teddy Mack if he could help to find Lucille. We saw something come over the fax machine in regards to Lucille being having a change of identity. So I don't know if that means she's just completely just gotten some plastic surgery done. She's no longer Lucille. So again, that is going to play out, I feel like, in season 5. And by the way, and if I forgot to mention it last week, that the Snowfall has been extended another season, but rightfully so, to season 5. So they have signed on for a season 5, which certainly is no surprise whatsoever. Still a lot of things to flush out. But we see Irene at the end of the episode. We see Irene turn in the article this information that she's going to, in terms of exposing the CIA as well as Franklin and his family. So again, great episode. You see, a unstable Teddy Mack, and you see Franklin having, of course, a number of issues within the family, within the organization, as he tries to recruit more soldiers and continuously tries to expand. The MVP of this episode was Alton, without question. The guy who plays him, Kevin Carroll, was tremendous in this episode from start to finish. This was a Alton-driven episode. He was in a number of scenes. You could just feel that, what's going on in the community is killing him. He no longer wants any part of this lifestyle or wants any part of his family having any part of this. So it'll be very interesting to see how they move forward with his character. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when Teddy Mack finds out that Alton's been running his mouth. So that's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Ril Dil podcast, Snowfall, Season 4, Episode 7. I will see you next time. Have a great, great evening.